So, welcome to LiberalViewer Wednesday Live. If you could hear me, can you please post a comment? I just want to make sure the equipment's working here. I also want to apologize. Last week, I did LiberalViewer Wednesday Live from a hotel room, and the stream just kept stopping and starting, and it just didn't really work out very well. And I think only about 7 minutes of the 15 minutes I did ended up being in the completed video that ended up uploaded onto YouTube. So sorry about that, but I'm back at home this week, and I'm here to start LiberalViewer Wednesday Live. And I didn't have many questions over the week, or maybe I missed them. I had a big backlog of questions while I was on vacation. But I did have one question posted in the last few minutes before LiberalViewer Wednesday Live started, so I'll start with that one. It comes from Anthony Byrne, and he asks, Michael Reagan will apparently be on CNN tonight claiming same-sex marriage is a slippery slope to polygamy and bestiality. Whether he argues that or not, and whether or not it's true, where should the actual line be? Just two consenting adults? Any number of consenting adults? If the union doesn't affect anybody else, what is the difference? Tradition? How does the ACLU stand on that? Or is there a stance? What about yourself? So that's the one question I have to start off with. Now, as far as what the ACLU position is on polygamy, I did find that the ACLU of Utah, I don't think it's that odd that the ACLU of Utah would have the most input on, or the most interest in the ACLU position on polygamy. They, on their website, they've put up policy number 91, National ACLU Policy on Polygamy, from April 1991. It says, the ACLU believes that criminal and civil laws prohibiting or penalizing the practice of plural marriage violate constitutional protections of freedom of expression and association, freedom of religion, and privacy for personal relationships among consenting adults. So at least according to the ACLU of Utah webpage, that's the ACLU's position on polygamy. But I haven't really found a lot of ACLU cases defending polygamy. The only one I found also came from the ACLU of Utah, and it's back from the 90s, the early 90s. You can see here it's from, the late 90s. It's from July of 1999, the ACLU of Utah to join polygamists in bigamy fight. And I don't know if you can read what it says there at the bottom, but it says, there's a quote from ACLU of Utah legal director Stephen Clark that says, living arrangements are really the most intimate kinds of decisions people make. Talking to Utah's polygamists is like talking to gays and lesbians who really want the right to live their lives and not live in fear because of whom they love. So certainly that kind of privacy expectation is something the ACLU is committed to protecting. That's down in the bottom paragraph. And this is from July 16th, 1999. So there aren't a lot of, it's not a big ACLU priority, but it looks like there is an ACLU policy that says that criminalizing polygamy is unconstitutional. Personally, I think that making relationships between consenting adults illegal violates the Constitution and certainly should violate the right to privacy. When it comes to marriage, I'm not sure that I personally oppose polygamy or think that polygamy should be illegal, but I do see a significant difference between polygamy and same-sex marriage that I think contradicts that slippery slope argument from the supposed Michael Reagan quote on CNN that's coming up. And the difference is that, there have been a lot of, I've talked about the rational basis tests, which the Supreme Court uses to check to see whether laws violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. And if there's no suspect class being discriminated against, it just says the legislature has to have a rational basis for discriminating against a certain group in a law, like saying that same-sex couples can't get married while opposite-sex couples can. And in a previous Liberal Viewer Wednesday Live, I talked about how I don't think that there's really a rational basis for excluding same-sex couples from marriage. And if you listen to the oral arguments in the Supreme Court, they tried to come up with some kind of rational basis, and they couldn't come up with anything. One thing they tried to come up with was saying that the purpose of marriage was procreation, but that's not really the purpose of marriage. People who can't procreate get married all the time. You know, people in their 70s can get married. We don't stop that. So the reason I think there's a difference between same-sex marriage and polygamy is that what marriage really is, it's not about procreation. Marriage is really about property. Originally, the woman was actually the property who was being exchanged, and a dowry was being paid, and so it was kind of a property exchange between the husband and the father of the bride. But these days, there are a lot of property laws and even custody laws and that are presuppose that marriage is between two people, not more than two people, and the way that the property is divided up at death or divorce is assumed to be two people, and like alimony payments, they compare the earnings of one spouse to the other spouse and decide how much the richer spouse has to pay the poorer spouse, and a lot of that wouldn't work with polygamy. So there actually is a rational basis for distinguishing between two-person marriage and multiple-person marriage because of all the laws about how property is divided up when the marriage ends. So I don't buy the slippery slope argument. I don't really think that if people want to get married, go into these plural marriages, as long as there's not some sort of coercion going on or real power difference. You know, a lot of these polygamous cults, the women are married off at a real, they're not even adults at the time. And consenting adults, I think, is really a bright line, dividing line in this kind of area. So anyway, I think that's kind of the answer to the polygamy question. I seem to be sweating a little. I took some Sudafed. I have a cold this week. I hope I don't sound too congested, but it seems to be making me sweat a little bit. But let me go back and see what kind of questions I have here from people. Since I don't have that many preloaded questions. Let's see. Christopher B. asks, can you give your opinion on the effects of conservative talk radio in society? I ask because I feel that was the major converter of my brother from sane to insane. Well, I've listened to a lot of talk radio over the years. I used to listen to Rush Limbaugh when I used to drive around in St. Louis a lot during the time he was on. And he started off, he's from Cape Girardeau, which isn't that far from St. Louis. And his brother is a judge when I was practicing in St. Louis, David Limbaugh. And apparently, some of his brothers are much more rational than Rush Limbaugh. And Rush Limbaugh is just like the most successful example of all the right-wing talk radio hosts. As to the effect of conservative talk radio, I think it's really popular among a certain segment of the population, and I've talked before about what I think it's kind of an echo chamber where people get their views parroted back to them and confirmed, and it makes them, feel better about their worldview. And I think that's what Rush Limbaugh does a lot. The arguments are really specious. They're really simplistic. They make the world a lot more simpler than it is and give people simple answers to complex questions. But I think it strengthens the people who have that tendency to begin with. I don't think it really converts that many people. Maybe it does a few, but I think it's more that it strengthens and unifies people who already have that tendency to begin with. And it gives them talking points to kind of, you know, talking points to they can use to justify the views they started off with to begin with, that, sound kind of clever, but don't really stand up to scrutiny. That's basically how I see Rush Limbaugh and a lot of the right-wing talk radio hosts, is they come up with these clever talking points, but if you look behind them, they don't really stand up. And, that's what I do with Fox News a lot, is I try to deconstruct some of their clever talking points and show how the facts just aren't there to back them up. Okay, so let me scroll up here and get to the next question. I'm not sure I can pronounce this. It's Mick1LE. Is that Mickle Pick, maybe? Asks, what is your thoughts on feminism? Well, this has been kind of a controversial subject on YouTube. I have some YouTube friends who seem to kind of come out against a certain brand of feminism, like Thunderf00t and TheAmazingAtheist, who I consider sort of my YouTube colleagues, friends. I've interacted with them for so many years on YouTube. And, they're a lot younger than I am. I remember when I was their age, I was in college. I think I've mentioned before that I went to Yale and got a history degree. And when I was there were a lot of radical feminists on campus. And I had the experience of, dealing with people who take a good idea, feminism, and I consider myself a feminist. I mean, I'm a stay-at-home dad. My wife is a physician, and I'm the primary parent who takes care of our daughter. And so I'm certainly not a traditional gender roles person, but I also see that there are people who take the good idea of feminism too far. And, I remember there were these codes where, people had to, I don't know if it went so far as to get in writing, but like every time you initiated some sort of like sexual contact, you had to get like verbal okay. And, and that, stopping rape is a very important goal. And there's a lot of date rape on campus. I don't want to minimize any of that, but that I think in any good movement, there are going to be people who are either dumb or radical or have their own issues that are going to take things too far. And you should never let those kinds of people let you give up on the real important, equality issues that feminists have been fighting for, all the way back to the suffrage movement and all that. So, I watched this, I can't remember her name, Rebecca something, the whole elevator gate thing. And it reminded me of some of the, radical feminists in college, and especially some of the people who think that you shouldn't be able to say certain things because they're triggers, and that when you're offended by speech, that gives you a right to censor that speech in a public forum. On the other hand, I think my friends Thunderf00t and TheAmazingAtheist sometimes go too far in giving up on the important basis of feminists and the feminist principles that I agree with, because that there's some wackos in any important movement, and you shouldn't let the wackos make the movement lose its legitimacy, because the principles are the principles are what is important, not the people who are espousing those principles. And if you remember what the principles are and you don't let people go too far with them, so I would consider myself a feminist, but I do realize that there are people who try to take a good idea and take it to an extreme where it has ridiculous aspects. So I guess that's my thoughts on feminism. Let me see if I can scroll up and get a few more comments here. Carly Frost asks, Liberal viewer, do you believe it would be a good thing for government to be removed from the equation of marriage and only enforce that if a church wants to perform a ceremony to marry, they can? Well, I've heard that argument before, that the solution to the same-sex marriage lawsuits and the rights of gays to get married is to get government out of marriage, and but that I think that's not ever going to happen. And I took family law in law school, and there's such a big legal history and so many laws and for marriage and for divorce, and as I was talking about before, for dissolution of property at divorce or death, that you're not going to get all that repealed and have government out of the marriage business. People can get married in a church without getting a government-sanctioned marriage anytime they want if they don't care about all those laws applying to them, and they can sign contracts. Civil unions are kind of like contracts between two people that aren't marriage but convey a lot of the rights of marriage, but civil unions aren't enough. That's one of the things that is coming up in this recent Supreme Court argument. There are like a huge number of federal benefits that you only get if you are legally married, but I don't think that government's going to get out of the marriage business, so we have to make it equal. And I don't know exactly what's going to happen in the Supreme Court, but I'm hoping. At least I think they're going to make same-sex marriage legal in California and strike down DOMA. I'm hoping that they're actually going to find a equal protection violation in denying the right of marriage to same-sex couples. That would be really nice. That I think is a very close question, and I'm leaning a little against it at the moment. But I think they may punt that down the road, and it'll eventually happen. But that would be the best result. So let me see. Let me check here for. I don't know why people mark comments as spam. Sir Christopher McFarlane says, "Has the amazing atheist is your friend? I thought all secularists had disavowed him." Well, when I say that he's my friend, I've never met the guy in real life. I've had some conversations with him online, and I watch most of his videos, which I find entertaining. I don't agree with all of his opinions, and I know he kind of went off the rails with that whole rape threat as a joke thing a while back, and I certainly didn't agree with that, and I think he lost a lot of people there. But I also saw him apologize, and he's a fairly young guy. At least I see so many people on YouTube are younger than I am, so I give them a little more leeway for making mistakes, and people can grow and learn from those mistakes. And I think that was a mistake that he made, and I saw him apologize for it. And as I said, I still think that he and also another guy, Thunderf00t, who I actually did meet once in real life, I think they go too far in their reaction to feminism because of some of the fringe people in feminism, or the people who take feminism too far, and then because of that they reject some of the important parts of feminism that they shouldn't, or at least that's my perception. Maybe I'm not accurately talking about what their position is, but I think that The Amazing Atheist is a provocateur, so he says a lot of things that are controversial, and he's almost like a stand-up comedian, which I in a previous Liberal Viewer Wednesday, I talked about how I'm a big fan of stand-up comedy, and people who say things that other people won't say, and I put him kind of in that category. So I used to call people, or there used to be friendships on YouTube. I had a whole thousands and thousands of YouTube friends, and that whole feature of YouTube disappeared. But I would call people YouTube friends because they were my friends on YouTube. But there aren't that many people who I've had conversations with that conversations directly back and forth with on YouTube. So, that's a little bit of a closer YouTube friendship. So I guess that is the answer to that question. I'm getting close to the end here, but let me scroll back a little. I think I may have missed a couple comments because, while I'm refreshing here and getting a few new comments, so please post questions. I have a little more time for about 5 or 10 minutes to finish up. But I also, one of the things I mentioned in Liberal Viewer Wednesday last week, I think I got cut off because I was in a hotel that didn't work, where the Wi-Fi wasn't working right, is I have this plan either to do another live show or to change this live show into a live show where I also show some news clips. I was thinking basically that I might start a Liberal Viewer Sunday show clip roundup. One of the reasons I feel sort of qualified to be a political pundit on YouTube, in addition to some of my educational background, is that I've been a political junkie for over 20 years now, since like the 80s. Since I was in high school and college, I've been watching these Sunday news shows. Like it started off with This Week with David Brinkley, and of course Meet the Press and Face the Nation, and then Fox News Sunday started in the 90s, and then there are some on CNN and MSNBC. Up with Chris Hayes was a really good one, although he just started a new weekly show, so that one's gone. But anyway, I've been watching these Sunday pundit political shows since like the early 80s, and every single week almost. And I think they're a good source of political news, especially because the same guests will go on and get questioned by different journalists, or in the case of Fox News, semi-journalists. And you can hear their talking points, and sometimes they get behind the talking points, and so you really get informed on the issues of the week, I think, by watching those shows. Or although when I started in the 80s, that was really like the one place you could go to get that kind of information. And now with the 24-hour cable news cycle, you get a lot more of that every day in a lot of different places online and on cable. So, but what I was thinking I might do is on Sunday evenings start another live show. But because the software that I use here for this live show lets me show clips, I choose like 2 or 3 clips from the Sunday shows that I thought were like the most provocative, or the most or something that I wanted to talk about, and I'll show the clips live, and then I'll make my own commentary on them, and then I'll respond to people's comments on the clips that I showed. So if you have any feedback on that, if you're now live, or if you're watching this during the week, I'd really like to hear what people think about that idea, like the Liberal Viewer Sunday show clip roundup idea for Sunday evenings. Or I don't know exactly how long it'll take me. I suppose I could combine it or do clips on the Wednesday show. But anyway, I'm going to take a few more comments here. Why are people flagging comments as spam? I hate it. I always go through and click the not spam. It's like... let me see. So just because they got marked as spam, I'm going to read it as a comment. It's from Slickman00. Says, what are your thoughts on prosecutors seeking the death penalty in the James Holmes case, the theater shooting? Well, I think, I haven't read any specific reports of psychologists who have examined the guy, but just from the news reports, my suspicion is the guy's kind of nuts. And I don't believe in the death penalty at all, but I really don't think that we should be executing like the mentally ill, or people who have some other mental disabilities. The Supreme Court's already decided that people with low IQs, mentally disabled people can't be executed. So, what the guy did, of course, is really awful, going into a movie theater and killing all those people. But I mean, I talked in a previous Liberal Viewer Wednesday Live about why, all the reasons that I oppose the death penalty, not just the fact that it's discriminatory, because if you kill white people, you're a lot more likely to get the death penalty, and there's the chance of executing innocent people, although I really don't think that's applicable in the James Holmes case. But one of the other things is it means there's going to be a trial, which is a big waste of resources. That's the other reason, is it's more expensive. The death penalty costs more than keeping someone in prison for life, as I discussed in detail in a previous episode, because there's a whole second trial for the penalty phase, and the death row costs several times more than a regular Gen Pop prison cell, and so you can keep people in prison for life for a lot less money than executing them, which of course is not the most important consideration, although in these days of strict budgets in a lot of states, that's what's changing a lot of people's minds. So I think I have time to take about one or two more questions. Oh, a lot of people like the news. Oh, Nate's Love Bug says, would you give a shout out to Nerdfighters, please? Well, I'm a big fan of Hank and John Green. They invited me to VidCon one year, and I've heard I haven't actually read John Green's book, The Fault is in Our Stars, but I've heard a lot of good things about it. I was actually going to get it for my daughter, so I'm happy to give a shout out to the Nerdfighters. Let me see. I think I can. I got time for one more question here, I think, from Dawn to Bugit, maybe Tbugit. North Korea situation. What should we do? Well, my last produced video I put up on Sunday is about whether the U.S. over vilifies North Korea, and I recommend everyone go and watch that video. It includes a clip from Karl Rove saying that maybe the U.S. should end its policy left over from the Korean War in the early 1950s, saying that the U.S. believes in Korean unification. But I've talked about this Korean issue briefly in that video and in some Liberal Viewer Wednesday Live episodes where, I mean, basically the key to controlling North Korea is China. China is the big supporter that keeps North Korea from collapsing. And China has an interest in North Korea continuing to exist so that South Korea isn't on its border, which is a greater threat, supposedly, although it's not like China doesn't have other countries on its border that could be, like, say India, for example. But I guess it's an additional threat. So China wants to keep North Korea going, and that's where North Korea gets most of its support. So the key to keeping North Korea in line is getting China's cooperation. And that's really complicated and is probably behind the scenes. And anyway, that is, what should we do? We should get the cooperation of China to keep North Korea in line, I guess. So I guess that is going to be Liberal Viewer Wednesday Live for this week. I appreciate everyone coming and supporting my channel. I want to remind everyone that you can ask me questions for next week's Liberal Viewer Wednesday on Facebook, facebook.com/liberalviewer, twitter.com/liberalviewer. Tune in next week for Liberal Viewer Wednesday Live at 4:30 p.m. Pacific. Thank you very much for joining me, and I hope to see you all next week.